This comprehensive video will navigate you through the essential codes and standards that govern every aspect of home construction, from the structural integrity of the foundation to the energy efficiency of your HVAC system. We'll delve into the intricacies of the International Building Code, International Residential Code, National Electrical Code, and International Plumbing Code, ensuring you understand the key requirements for a structurally sound and functional home. International Building Code. Foundation requires proper soil analysis and foundation design based on local conditions and seismic activity. For example, in earthquake-prone zones, the IBC might specify deeper foundations or reinforced concrete. Wall construction specifies minimum wall thickness, stud spacing, and bracing for structural integrity and wind resistance. For instance, exterior walls in high wind areas might require closer stud spacing or shear wall reinforcement. Fire safety mandates fire-resistant materials, proper egress, and smoke alarms. An example would be interior walls separating dwelling units that might need to be constructed with fire-rated drywall. Means of egress requires adequate exits, hallways, and stairwells for safe evacuation in case of fire. For example, hallways must maintain a minimum width, and stairwells may need handrails and landings. International Residential Code. Stairways set standards for riser height, tread depth, handrails, and guardrails to prevent falls. For example, risers cannot exceed 7 3/4 inches in height, and treads must be at least 10 inches deep. Roofing specifies minimum slope requirements for proper drainage and wind resistance based on local climate. For instance, roofs in areas with heavy snowfall might require a steeper slope to shed snow effectively. Windows requires minimum sizes and emergency escape and rescue openings in bedrooms for fire safety. An example would be that bedrooms must have windows that meet minimum size requirements for egress. Insulation sets minimum R values for insulation in walls, ceilings, and floors to promote energy efficiency. For example, attics might require R38 insulation, while walls might need R13 or higher. National Electrical Code. Grounding requires proper grounding of electrical systems to prevent shock hazards. For example, all electrical outlets must be grounded, and metal conduit must be bonded. Wiring methods specifies approved wiring methods and materials for different applications. For instance, wiring in wet locations must be protected by conduit or be rated for wet locations. GFCI protection mandates. Ground fault circuit interrupters in bathrooms, kitchens, and other areas where water is present. An example would be outlets within 6 feet of a sink in a bathroom must be GFCI protected. Arc fault circuit interrupters requires AFCI protection in bedroom circuits to prevent fires caused by arcing faults. For example, all 120-volt, single-phase, 15 and 20 ampere branch circuits supplying outlets or devices installed in dwelling unit bedrooms must have AFCI protection. The International Plumbing Code, or IPC, is essential for maintaining the health and safety of our homes. It requires proper venting of plumbing fixtures to prevent sewer gases from entering the home. For example, each plumbing fixture must be connected to a vent pipe that terminates outdoors. The IPC also sets standards for water pipe sizing and materials to ensure adequate water pressure and prevent contamination. For instance, water supply pipes must be sized to provide adequate flow to all fixtures. When it comes to drainage, the IPC specifies proper slope and sizing of drain pipes to ensure efficient wastewater removal. For example, drain pipes must have a minimum slope to ensure proper drainage. Finally, the IPC sets standards for the installation of plumbing fixtures, like toilets, sinks, and showers, to ensure proper function and sanitation. For example, toilets must be installed with a minimum distance from walls and other fixtures. The International Mechanical Code, or IMC, sets crucial standards for building mechanical systems. Ventilation. It requires proper ventilation in all habitable spaces to ensure adequate fresh air intake and exhaust of pollutants. For example, bathrooms must have exhaust fans vented to the exterior. Heating and cooling. The IMC sets minimum standards for heating and cooling system capacity and efficiency. For instance, furnaces must meet minimum efficiency requirements. Combustion air. Proper combustion air supply is required for fuel-burning appliances. A good example is that gas furnaces must have adequate combustion air intake. Refrigeration. The code also sets standards for the installation and maintenance of refrigeration systems. For example, refrigerant lines must be properly sealed to prevent leaks. The International Energy Conservation Code, or IECC, focuses on energy efficiency in building design and construction. Building envelope. It requires minimum insulation levels and air sealing in walls, roofs, and floors. For example, exterior walls must have a minimum insulation R value. Windows. The IECC sets standards for window U values and solar heat gain coefficient, or SHGC. For instance, windows must meet certain energy efficiency requirements. Lighting. The code requires energy-efficient lighting fixtures and controls. For example, a certain percentage of lighting must be high efficiency. Water heating. It sets standards for water heater efficiency and insulation. For instance, water heaters must meet minimum energy factor requirements. HVAC systems. The IECC requires minimum efficiency levels for heating and cooling systems. For example, air conditioners must have a minimum SEER rating. The Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, ensures accessibility in building design and construction. Ramps. It requires ramps with specific slope and landing requirements for wheelchair access. For example, ramps must have a maximum slope of 1 to 12. Doorways. The ADA mandates minimum doorway widths and thresholds for wheelchair passage. For instance, doorways must be at least 32 inches wide. Bathrooms. It requires accessible bathroom features like grab bars and roll-in showers. For example, bathrooms must have adequate turning space for wheelchairs. Kitchens. The ADA requires accessible kitchen features like lowered countertops and accessible appliances. For instance, countertops must be at a certain height for wheelchair users. Hallways and circulation. It requires minimum hallway widths and turning spaces for wheelchair maneuverability. For example, hallways must be a minimum width for wheelchair passage. Important note. These are just a few examples, and the specific requirements can be much more detailed. Always consult the most recent versions of the codes and work with qualified professionals to ensure your project meets all applicable standards.